Thank you for coming. What we have assembled today is a diverse group of senators from both sides of the aisle who are organizing together to filibuster the FISA bill. We are here to filibuster the bill because we think there need to be more protections for Americans. FISA is about spying on foreigners in foreign lands. I think most of us agree that the program has value and is useful, but we should not use information collected without constitutional protection on Americans. And so at the very least, there ought to be a warrant to search an American in the database. The database is enormous. We think maybe millions of Americans are caught up in this database. The intelligence community has not been very forthcoming about how many Americans are in the database, whether or not domestic to domestic, purely domestic information is in the database, and how often they're looking at it. So we would like to see more protections for Americans, and we would like to see that the Constitution is adhered to as it was intended. With that, I'd like to introduce Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Senator Paul. So great to be here with Chairman Leahy, Senator Daines. What unites our bipartisan coalition is that we strongly oppose an end run on our Constitution. We stand united in terms of fighting terrorists on foreign soil. That is not what is at issue. The fact, however, is 702, this law that we're debating, is a whole lot broader than fighting terrorists. It allows warrantless government surveillance of foreigners thought to have foreign intelligence information. That's practically anything that relates to the foreign affairs of the United States. Practically everything about foreign countries relates to American foreign affairs. So let me give you an example of the kind of Americans who can get swept up, law-abiding Americans, in these 702 searches. Americans who talk to foreigners, for example, overseas, like a Midwestern steel company executive or a business person talking to their foreign contacts, or a second or third generation American immigrant talking to family and friends overseas. Somebody asking an overseas friend advice on business or maybe even a vacation. How about U.S. service members talking to foreign friends they made while deployed? American teachers and researchers seeking information from foreigners. And the government can conduct warrantless searches for your private communications. The bill that the House passed is extreme. In some particulars, it actually goes backward, and we are united especially in saying that a bill of this importance ought to be open to a real Senate debate, not a blast through the Senate on the most extreme procedure possible. No amendments, no discussion, our way or the highway. So I'm very pleased to be with our colleagues. Chairman Leahy, Senator Warren are both here, and Senator Daines, if it's acceptable to Senator Warren. Would you like to go first?
You want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah, fine. Good. I'd be glad to. I have plenty I want to say. And that is that the United States should not be in the business of warrantless searches, of dragnet surveillance of American citizens. I am here today to join my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, because we need reforms to our intelligence programs to achieve two goals. First, better protections for Americans' privacy, and second, more accountability and transparency. I am deeply troubled by the Trump administration's reckless disregard for the rule of law and repeated attempts to flout our Constitution. But I want to be clear about this issue. Opposing warrantless mass surveillance is not a partisan issue. It is not just about which party controls Congress or which party controls the White House. That's why I am glad to be here today with people from both sides of the aisle. The Section 702 program was passed because our intelligence community needed new 21st century tools to obtain critical information about foreign threats to our national security. But far too often and for far too long, these programs have been turned into a back door to monitor the emails and the phone calls of American citizens who are not national security threats. And that's why Congress must step up and put guardrails in place that ensure that Section 702 is used for its intended purpose, to keep us safe from foreign threats. I've joined the other senators here today in supporting Senator Wyden's USA Rights Act to establish new privacy protections that make sure that our intelligence gathering is focused on achieving our national security goals without destroying our privacy rights. Until we take real, meaningful steps to protect the constitutional right to privacy and to add more accountability to the intelligence system, the Senate should reject reauthorization of Section 702. I am pleased to introduce Senator Daines.
All right. Thank you, Senator Warren. As Americans, we're grateful that we are born with certain rights outlined in our Constitution under the Bill of Rights. One of them is protection from unreasonable searches and seizures, or the right to privacy. I think if we were able to speak with James Madison or Thomas Jefferson today and throw out the terms email, metadata, a cell phone, they'd have no idea what we're talking about. But trying to think through the lens and the principles of our protection of the Constitution, if we told them that that meant that our government could take information from a U.S. citizen, perhaps a letter, without a warrant, let me frame this in a way that I think Madison and Jefferson would have significant concerns over what's going on right now with Section 702. This week, the Senate will attempt to pass a bill that misses the mark on protecting this fundamental constitutional right. In response to attacks on American citizens and the values our nation stands for, the U.S. government has changed the way it tracks down terrorists. FISA is one of those changes, which allows the government to monitor certain conversations on the internet and on the phone without a warrant. Again, our founding fathers would have no idea what the internet meant, our phone meant, and it's responsible senators that need to look at the Constitution and ensure that these rights are protected. Congress intended for this program to target foreign terrorist suspects living on foreign land. It was intended to promote Americans' safety, Americans' freedom, but not to limit it. But along with collecting useful information about those foreign targets, this program has gathered up information on innocent Americans and therefore is ripe for potential abuse. I believe the 702 program is an important tool to prevent future terrorist attacks. I think all of us standing here believe that. But we need strong oversight and reform to prevent it from being misused. The USA Rights Act makes those necessary reforms and makes strides towards protecting Americans' privacy. We must do our due diligence in debating this program to make sure it does not stomp on the Fourth Amendment rights of the American people.
Thank you. You know, I agree so much with what my colleagues have said, and I had a lot of conversations over the weekend with Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who was going to be here, but his flight's been delayed because of weather. In my state of Vermont, all Vermonters, whatever the party they belong to, believe we should be protected against acts by foreign governments, whether manipulating our way of life, attacking us economically, physically, or however. But there is one thing that would unite every single Vermonter, and that's a sense of privacy, that we have rights as Americans to be secure from our own government, to stop our own government from being able to spy on us. Well, 702, as it's written, allows our government to spy on us. I was recently in Italy visiting my relatives in northern Italy. I wonder how many of my phone calls back and forth were getting swept up because I was calling somebody in Europe. I would like to think if they were next door to me in Vermont, they wouldn't be. But now it turns out they might be. We should have a chance. This is such an important issue. It affects every single person. We have senators who go across the political spectrum, literally saying, wait a minute, go after foreign intelligence, but protect Americans' privacy. That's what we want to do. And we can do it if we are at least allowed to vote on amendments. This is critical to every single American. I don't care what political party they belong to, where they're from. They're affected by it. They expect the United States Senate, which should be the conscience of the nation, to at least vote up or down on amendments. The bill we're considering is a fig leaf of reform. We have to end backdoor search loopholes. We have to find a way to make sure that Americans are protected. Let's have a vote. What are people afraid of? Let's vote. We're a democracy, not a dictatorship. Let's vote. Let's protect Americans. Right now, this bill pretends to protect Americans. It is probably as much of a threat to our privacy as anything I've seen here. I've been in hearings in this committee room where we talk about America's privacy. As a young law student, I sat in and watched hearings where we found out where even parts of our government had overreached in destroying people's privacy. And we've always said, whether it's to J. Edgar Hoover or anybody else, we have a right to our privacy in America. We fought a revolution for that. We have upheld a constitution for that. Let's not vote down a significant part of our own constitution.
Well said, Patrick. Thank you.
So realize there's two reasons we are filibustering this. We think that the reforms are inadequate, but we also object to not being allowed to vote on our reforms. Senator Wyden and I have a bill, Senator Leahy and Senator Lee have a bill, and I think there's varieties of us on both bills and an overlap between the two bills. But we insist that there be at least debate, which means votes on whether there should be more adequate reform. A big thing for us is that if you're going to look at Americans' information, you ought to get a warrant from a judge. With that, we'll have questions. Yes. If you announce who you are and which media network, please.
With Communications Daily, are you confident that if the bill is passed out of the Senate today, that the National Security Agency will commit to ending abouts collection, or do you think legislation is needed to ensure
if the current bill passes, the one they're putting forward? I'll comment briefly, and I'd like to hear from some of the others on this, but our belief is that the bill actually codifies a way where they can restart the about collection, and that there's more danger with this bill of the about collection starting again than there is with the current law. Senator Wyden?
Just briefly, the history was, going back for years, we battled to put guardrails on abouts collection. Finally, the government acknowledged that they had gone so far, they had to move administratively to get rid of abouts collection. It's clear now there is a new drumbeat to try to get back in the business of abouts collection. And for those, without getting into the density of all this, abouts collection is what it sounds like. If somebody basically is just mentioned in a communication, then in effect you set in motion all of the expedited processes that Chairman Leahy spoke about so eloquently to get their data without their rights.
Okay.
John with Bloomberg. The deadline for reauthorization is January 19th, Friday. So what happens if the cloture vote today fails?
If the cloture vote fails, those who support their bill would have to come to those of us who support reform, and we would work out a compromise. I don't think anybody standing up here wants it to expire. There would be a compromise in between. Senator Leahy?
No, I agree with what Senator Paul said. We would end up with the ability to go after foreign threats, but we'd do it with the protection of Americans. I mean, This should be a win-win for Americans. One win is that we're protected from foreign threats. The second win, that we are protected ourselves even from our own government. And I feel strongly about that. I have every day I've been here in the United States Senate. Certainly it's the way people in my state of Vermont feel.
The only other aspect of that is the Office of National Intelligence, the office that Dan Coates runs. They have stated of their own volition that legal authority would continue. And it's our understanding that legal authority would run through April. So Chairman Leahy is absolutely right. We continue to believe that if we can prevail on this cloture vote, we would all come together as the Senate does and as Chairman Leahy's done so many times, and Senator Paul and I would like to be part of it. We'd be part of an effort to come up with a list of amendments to fix this. It is also important to note that the ODNI, the Office of National Intelligence, has actually acknowledged that they have legal authority to run this program, as is, through the end of April. So this is not as if, as is always the case, somebody says, oh my goodness, it doesn't pass, and then everybody in America is at risk.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good.
Wait, I'm sorry.
We'll do what we have one more.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Hi, Ashley Pillow with CNN. Senator Paul, have you spoken to the President again since your Thursday morning conversation, and has he indicated he might support maybe bringing this up as a separate bill?
I haven't spoken with the President again. I don't think he has a specific position that I know of on whether or not we should be allowed to present alternatives. I would suspect if he were here, he would be horrified by the notion that we're not going to have any alternatives presented to this bill. I think most people are. We're called the world's most deliberative body, and we're not allowed to have any amendments. The House has a much more structured atmosphere over there, and they were allowed a full-throated debate and an amendment. So, no, I'm surprised that we're not being allowed an amendment, and I think if the President were here, he would support that. I think one of the interesting things about the whole debate, though, is that, Madison said we needed rules because men are not angels. I think if you took a discussion between us, we might not all agree on who the angels are and who the demons are. We might have different opinions, but we would all agree that there are angels and demons in government, and that's why you need rules to oversee the government. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We will make America great again.